Hello and welcome to this episode of Keep the High Balls Low. As always, I'll be your host, Lewis Blair. Tonight, I'm delighted to say that we've managed to get another brilliant guest. I'm joined by former Aberdeen Rangers and Leeds star, David Robertson. Davie, first of all, thanks very much for coming on my podcast.
No problem, it's a pleasure. Looking forward to it.
We'll just go back to the start, if that's okay. You grew up in Aberdeen. How was life growing up, Davie, and when did you first fall in love with football?
I didn't really start playing football till I was about 8 years old. We lived in a council estate called Garthdee, and it was just typical of football in those days with kids. You go to a park and straight after school we were the youngest ones at 8 years old and would play, and then the high school kids would come, and it suddenly became about 20 a side, and adults would come home from their work and it was about 30 a side. So by about 7 o'clock at night, it was about 30 a side, and that's when all we did, the younger ones, 8, 9-year-old, just got kicked about and never touched the ball. But it was a great grounding, and obviously you don't see that these days. But I first, it wasn't until I was 8 years old that I actually began to play football or take an interest in football. My dad was a season ticket holder at Pittodrie at Aberdeen, and he did all he could to get me back involved in football, but it just wasn't happening. And it wasn't until Aberdeen beat Celtic in the 1976 League Cup final, and we won 2-1 at Hampden, and obviously in Aberdeen they go down the Union Street in the open top bus, and my dad and my mum bought me all the kit and the flags and everything to try and sort of get me into football. And then after that I was just totally hooked on the game. I wasn't particularly very good, so I first got a trial for the primary school team in Inchgarth, and because I'd only just started playing, I never made it. And it wasn't until probably a couple of weeks into it that there was a game, and I think someone was ill. I got drafted in at the last minute, and I think it was a sub, and I think I got on and I got subbed off. I think I was that bad, so I didn't. My career didn't start off very well, and I think that that experience really sort of gave me the sort of the urge later on in my career, because I never thought I was good enough to play for Aberdeen or Rangers or Leeds or anything like that. And I think it was that experience that I was always a little bit insecure of my ability. And but I certainly, after that first bad experience, I just played football in the back garden. My sister had a swing, that's quickly turned into. I got a net. All my mum's family from Peterhead, we got a fishing net from the trawlers, and put it over the swing, so it was no more a swing, it was now a goal. And I would spend hours and hours, if I wasn't at the local park with all the adults and kids my age. I was in the back garden from the moment I came home from school until after that, and I was just totally hooked on it. And it's a little bit different to how things are today. And there was, when I was growing up, I think it was 3 channels on TV. There was no football on TV. Certainly no PlayStations, computers, nothing. So you had to entertain yourself just by playing football. And thankfully for me, and I was in an area where there was no other distractions, because, as I say, I wasn't very good at the start. So I don't think I would have got any better if there was any more distractions, I think.
Once you got into football, David, who was it that you looked up to? Who were your heroes in football?
Well, there was quite a few, really. It was actually quite bizarre, because the 1976 Cup final, when Aberdeen beat Celtic, my mum took me to. It was called Fine Fair then. It was now ASDA, and there was some booklet, celebration booklet, that you could buy, and we bought one at ASDA. And I remember there was Jockey Scott, Willie Miller, Joe Harper, all those guys there signed the book. But Joe Harper was my real hero. Just obviously the goals he scored, just a natural goal scorer, and I think he was everybody's favourite at Aberdeen. But the bizarre thing for me was, when I think back, I ended up playing the same team as Willie Miller. I was an 8, 9-year-old boy getting his autograph, and you forget how young he was. I think he was only a teenager, and he was the captain of Aberdeen at the time. And then obviously Jockey Scott, he played in the cup final, and he ended up being a co-manager at Aberdeen during my time. So I think Willie really was the one that stood out for me. Just and obviously playing alongside him, sharing a dressing room with him. Although he did give me a hard time, I must admit, when I first got in the team. Every bad pass Willie made, it was my fault. So, and I was so in awe of Willie Miller and obviously Alec McLeish and these guys that, I was always a very, very quiet guy in the dressing room. But probably, obviously, Joe Harper just because he scored the goals, but Willie Miller because, I ended up, he was the captain of Aberdeen at the time, and we'd go to all the games and watch him. And then Willie had this thing when he used to do an up and under. He would get the ball and he'd smash it up into the sky, going towards the goal, and he'd just run through everybody. And it never worked, but he got a big cheer from the crowd. That's one of the memories I've got. But he was just a real legend for the club. I think there's obviously captained the club and became the manager. Obviously won the Cup Winners' Cup and director of football, just Mr. Aberdeen, and he was the one that really sort of took my eye at the early part.
When did things start to change for you, Davie? When did you start to impress? And obviously you go on to sign for Aberdeen on an S form. I think that's similar to an apprenticeship, you would call it these days.
Well, the S form was when you're at school. So I signed, I think it was 13 or 14 years old. Alex Ferguson was at the club. He was the one that signed me as an S form. But I played in the. Somehow I managed to get myself a regular game in the primary school team. Then played in the Aberdeen Primary School Select, and you probably remember a guy, Andy Smith at Airdrie. He played in the same team as me. He went on to play Airdrie, Dunfermline, and a number of clubs. So I'd get in that team, and there was one or two other selects. But once you went to secondary school at Harlow Academy, obviously that team stopped. I was still playing for the boys' club, and luckily enough, Mark Ferguson, which was one of Alex Ferguson's son, played in the same team. So I think he saw me a little bit there. But on a Monday night, we would actually train all those players when we went to secondary school. We'd train on a Monday night in the car park across the road. It's like glazed surface. They use it on a match day as a car park. So we would play against a Highland League team. You're talking about 12, 13-year-old boys. And training there, and then Alex Ferguson actually used to come and watch on a Monday night. And I remember my dad saying that Alex Ferguson, that he'd overheard Alex Ferguson mentioning me, and I actually got a phone call. It's weird because just a couple of weeks before that, Manchester United came to my parents' house and asked me to go to Manchester United, and I think Aberdeen must have got wind of it. And the next thing I know, my dad gets a phone call from Lenny Taylor and asks if I wanted to sign S forms, and obviously being my local team, and obviously my dad was, a real proud father the day I signed S forms, and after that, it's weird because I remember that even at 14, 15 years old, I was still playing for a boys' club called D-Side, but I also played in the reserves. I remember one game playing against Rangers reserves, and whenever Derek Johnson played and John McDonald, and I think I was about 14 or 15 at the time. I was a left winger when I first started. I was a left winger and sometimes a striker. But I soon realised, pretty quickly that in that position I certainly wasn't going very far. I was a bit of a one-trick pony. I'd have a bit of pace, knock it and run. But unfortunately, when you're playing against bigger and older guys, they can read the situation, and you need a little bit more to be a forward area of the pitch. And luckily enough, but during the reserve, I think it was a pre-season game, there was guys like I got taken. It's Keith or Rothis in the Highland League. They had a tournament, and so Teddy Scott, who's no longer with us, he took the team, and we only went there with about 13 or 14 players, and I played as a left winger. And I remember the day, it was a Saturday, and I was horrendous, and I just couldn't get past. And now you're talking Highland League players, you're not talking Premier League players or anything. Granted, I was only still 15, so I ended up. On the Saturday night, there were so many injuries that in the morning of the game on the Sunday, it was a final. I don't even know who we played that day, but anyway, there was only 11 fit players, and I remember Teddy Scott having a team meeting saying, "Look, we've got who's going to play left back? We've got nobody." And somebody shouts, "Well, Davies is the only guy with a left foot, so he can play as a left back." And I'd never ever played left back before, nothing. And funnily enough, I got man of the match that day, and I became a left back the rest of my career, which, it was a little bit of luck, because if I hadn't, I would have been looking for a job somewhere, I think, pretty quickly after that.
You mentioned, obviously, there was a bit of luck involved, but that you were playing reserve football at 14, 15. I mean, now it doesn't happen, and now you've got under 23 leagues, under 21 leagues. But as you said, you found it tough coming up against, bigger, stronger guys. But I mean, that probably helped you, because I think you started to impress from quite an early age.
Yeah, no, I remember one game against St John's. It was actually the first reserve game. I played against a guy, Don McVicker, and I mean, he just used to kick anything that moved. And I was playing as a striker. He was playing as a centre back that day, and he was coming to the end of his career. And he just kicked me up and down the park. And a lot of the times, reserve games were used for, like players coming back from fitness, and maybe one or two players that are out of the team need some games. But it was weird because then they used to play, if the first team were playing, say, at Ibrox, the reserve team would be playing at Pittodrie at the same time. So you're either going to play in one or the other. But you're right, it's toughened me up a lot. And I think that's a big problem these days because, I think when you're 16, 17, 18-year-old, you do need to play against the older, experienced players, not just against the guys your own age or similar idea. But I just think it really, really helped me. And, whether I thought at the time that I wasn't making an impact, subconsciously it was actually helping me a lot because, you've got to learn, you've got to be quick on your feet, you've got to move the ball quicker. I remember that game, Derek Johnson, he was a centre-back at the time, end of his career, I couldn't even get past him. I don't even think, as soon as I got the ball, he took it off me. But you soon learn because then you go back to playing with your own age. Because I was still playing for a boys' club at the time as well, and I was flying. I was doing really well there. But it's just the way it was in those days. And there's many players I played with in Scotland teams like like Derek White and Joe Miller and who was Paul Wright. Everybody. Billy McKinley at Dundee United, and just Stevie Campbell, all these guys, and they went through the same thing, and they'll all say that it was made them better players, and I think it made you grow up quickly because in those days, I was fortunate enough that I played my first team. I got my first team debut at the age of 17, early on in the season, but it was because I was used to playing against adults, and that doesn't happen very often, and unless you're a real top quality player. That doesn't happen. It's normally about 19, 20, 21 now you get your first game. But, as I say, I wasn't the greatest player, but I think playing with the older players, experienced players, was good. And the one thing that they used to talk to you during the game as well. So your opponents, like Derek Johnston or Don McVicker, they would actually talk to you during the game and give you some encouragement and tell you what you should be doing. And obviously that doesn't happen now.
Who were the good? You mentioned guys like Willie. Who were the other good senior pros? And was there anyone that was particularly tough or took a keen interest in you when you were coming through?
Willie was the toughest one for me. I mean, in the game. I mean, he encouraged me at the same time. I was lucky that big Alec McLeish. When I first broke in the team, I was playing in front of Jim. Well, Jim Layton was there, and McKimmie was at the right back. With Willie Miller, Alec McLeish, and obviously like guys like Jim Bett. Peter Weir was an incredible player. He helped me a lot, particularly on the pitch. But it was quite funny because I was on the ground staff. So like at 16, you leave school and you're an apprentice, and you've got to do the jobs. You've got to, like, I had to sweep this hairy carpet in the home dressing room. There was no vacuum cleaners. You weren't allowed to use that. You had to. It took me about 3 hours the first time I did it, and Alex Ferguson and Archie would come in and inspect it and say there's a blade of grass, there's a blade of grass, and you've got to get everything out, and it would take forever, but eventually, and I couldn't understand why, but obviously it's to make you mentally tough, and eventually I could do it in 20 minutes, and then I'd have to get the training kit out for the first team. There was about 3 or 4 of us. So I played my first game against Hamilton Accies, came on as a sub, and I remember on the Monday morning I went in the away dressing room, and I waited to do my jobs, and Teddy Scott says, no, you're a first team player now. You need to go in the home dressing room. And you're going in with all these guys that had just recently won the European Cup Winners' Cup, beat Real Madrid. And I was begging Teddy to say, no, I'll just stay in that away dressing room. I don't want to go in. I was terrified. But to be fair, they looked after me. And I think because I was, I think probably I was only, 17 at the time. And I think the next oldest player must have been about, 21, 22. So I'm not saying they took a shine to me, but they looked after him. But Big Alec was great. Doug Rugby was still there at the time. But they were just fantastic. But Peter Weir, Billy Stark was there, John Hewitt, a legend there. They were all good. And I remember Stuart McKimmie, one time we're away in a pre-season, and you're young, you're enthusiastic, and if there's a night out, you're first for the night out, and I wasn't. He just told me, he says, look, you've got a great future. Don't do anything stupid. Keep your nose clean and just focus on your football. And that's one of the things that really helped me during my career. That I did. A lot of the players that I played, the younger boys, sort of fell by the wayside. The out in the town a lot, and I sort of stayed away from that. And as I say, I was very, very fortunate that the players that I was with were international players and looked after me.
Alex Ferguson, that we mentioned, he would obviously go on to do great things, not only at Aberdeen but at Man U. What's so impressive? What impressed me listening to you, Davie, was that he went to watch a game on a Monday when you were 14. Do you think that attention to detail is one of the reasons why he was so successful?
Yeah, well, on that Monday nights, sometimes if my dad wasn't there, I would have to get two buses to get home. So there was one just behind the old beach end, the number 11 bus that would take you into town, then you'd have to get another bus. And I remember after that training session one night, and I'd never spoke to Alex Ferguson before. Yeah, I was an S form. In fact, it wasn't an S form at the time. And I was waiting at the bus to go into town about 9 o'clock at night. And he pulls up a silver Mercedes. And obviously I was terrified of him. And he said, get in the car. So I get in the car. He drove me straight to my house. Didn't even ask where I lived. He just knew everything. Every night, if it was a game, if it was Wick, if it was Brora Rangers, if it was, Inverurie Locos, anywhere, he would be away watching games. And he took every training session with Archie. He used to go to the boys' clubs games, like juveniles. If it was a midweek game or a Sunday game, you'd see him walking about looking at players. And as you say, his attention to detail. And the one thing I remember about him is that, even if the first team or any team won a game, if you made a mistake, he would come down on you like a ton of bricks. We played Clydebank once in the first team and we won 5-0, and I made a mistake, and he basically butchered me for it. But I never made that mistake again. So he's a lot of managers. You win a game and everything's fine. You won a game, that's fine. But any mistake, and I think that he was a perfectionist, and there's no surprise how he went on to basically being. I think he's probably the greatest manager of all time.
Yeah. Eventually leaves the club. Did you get a chance to speak to him? He left. Did he come and speak to you?
No, but he actually tried to get me to go to Manchester United. I played. I was in the first team at the time. He put me in the first team, and then he left. But I think Archie was still at the club at the time for a few weeks until they got a new manager in. But we played. I was in the youth team. I had to play a youth team game. They never really had a youth team at that point, under 18s, but we played the Scottish Cup. So I think we played at Parkhead one night in Glasgow. So we didn't get back to Aberdeen till about 1 o'clock in the morning. And I remember driving home to my parents' house, and there's a car behind me, and I'm looking, and I see that they're getting closer and closer, and I'm going. It's maybe a 30 mile an hour. I'm going 80 mile an hour, and this car stopped. They kept flashing the lights. Then I thought to myself, "Oh no, shit! It might be the police." So I pulled over, and it was Alex Ferguson, and obviously told me to get in his car, and he says to me, "I want you to come to Manchester United," and I says, "Yeah, but I had a long." He actually signed me in a long contract. He signed me in a contract. I think it was 2 years with a 2-year option, and the option is the club's. It's not my option. And I says, "I've got this contract. Don't worry, I'll get you out of that," and blah blah blah. And then Archie took the team, and I'd been playing almost every game, and he left me out of a game. I think it was a friendly game, a testimonial. So I didn't play that game. So Ian Porterfield come to watch the game. He was the next manager. So he says, "Right, I'll go with the same team on Saturday." And Teddy Scott says, No. He says, "You need to play Davie. He's been doing well." So I think that Teddy Scott told me later on, maybe it's about a year after, he told me that the idea was for me to be left out of the team. They'd forget about me, and then they'd take me to Manchester United at the end of that season. So, but I think, to be honest, Manchester United weren't in a great shape, and I was only 18, I think, at the time, far too young to be going there.
Unfortunately, Alex Smith and Jot would come in as co-managers, but how was Ian as a manager?
Yeah. He was good. I just don't think he knew the Scottish game. At that point, Aberdeen were used to going to Rangers and Celtic, and the new format that was called at that point. You go there and you'd win. You're confident, but in England, he was used to coaching or managing in the lower leagues, and a draw would be a good result. And you no disrespect to like St Mirren or Hamilton Accies in those days. Aberdeen should have been beating them, but if we draw a game, he was happy with that. But at the same time, I think he was second in the league. He got to the League Cup final, lost in penalty kicks. But whoever came in after Alex Ferguson basically had no chance. As you can see at Manchester United, like Manchester United's the same. They've had the biggest managers come in, and they've all not saying they've failed, but they haven't sort of reached the same heights at Alex Ferguson. So, and I think that's always been a problem for Aberdeen since the day he left. Even to this day, it's difficult.
You'd eventually go on to win the League Cup final. I know you mentioned that the Aberdeen team lost, but in 1989 you play Rangers, and you win 2-1. I think you're up against Francis, as I'm right. How was that experience, especially being so young?
Yeah, I mean, I actually played there was 2 cup finals previous to that. The one I mentioned, we lost in penalty kicks. I actually broke my foot in the semi-final against Dundee at Tannadice, so I missed the final. But Ian Porterfield gave me his medal, so at least I got a medal for that for my efforts. And then the year after that, Rangers I think beat us 3-2, and probably the worst game I ever played in an Aberdeen shirt. That was horrendous. I was at fault for one of the goals, and then I switched. I was marking. I think I might be marking Terry Butcher or Richard Gough. I don't know why. I wasn't exactly as big as Alec McLeish and these guys, but anyway, I was picking them up, and Brian Irving came on as a sub, and I switched, and I think Brian got beat for a header, and we lost. I think Alan McCoy scored the winner. So it's probably one of the worst games I played for Aberdeen. So the next game I was real nervous, but it was weird because that was the day where Alex Smith threw in Ian Jess to the game. I think it was one of his first games that he started, and to be honest with you, Rangers didn't expect it, and it certainly threw them off, and we won the game. Obviously after extra time we won the game, and it's probably one of the most memorable sort of finals that I've played in, because it was my first one, and the relief to win it, and the excitement, and obviously because it's Aberdeen, you get to go on the open top bus, that I'd watched many times as a kid, and to actually do it was just something special. And it was just great, and particularly against Rangers, because obviously Souness was there and the revolution was beginning to start, and we were a bit of the underdogs, but managed to do it. And I had a long throw in that caused a bit of mayhem for Paul Mason to score the winner. So it was a great feeling. And I mean, later on that season we went on and won the Scottish Cup as well against Celtic with a cup double. Probably the worst Scottish Cup final ever played. I think both teams could have still been playing today and never scored. And then, fortunately, I managed to score a penalty kick, and that was the weirdest feeling ever, because Mike Galloway would give me a dead leg, I think in extra time, and the first 5 penalty, I'd never taken a penalty kick before at that level, and the first 5 were taken. And you think to yourself, my leg had seized up by this time, and you think to yourself, well, I'm not going to be taking one. And then it goes to the 6th one, the 7th one, and the 8th one. I'm thinking, oh no. And I looked along the line, and here's Graham Watson, who I think he was 17 or 18. I think he came on as a sub in that game. So he was like, and I thought, I need to grow a set of balls here and take a penalty kick. I can't have that young kid taking it. And I'd forgotten a bit on my leg, and I remember walking up to the goal, up to the penalty spot, and I could hardly move. And I couldn't run, and I took like 2 steps. And when you look at it on TV, it looks like it's the coolest penalty kick ever. I was so calm, but I had no idea what to do. And I went up, and my leg, I could only run 2 steps, and I tried to hit it to Pat Bonner's right hand side. And thankfully I mishit it, and I went straight in the middle. Otherwise, he would have saved it. So that was another open top bus event. Only managed to do 2 of them, but it was a great achievement for Aberdeen in those days, particularly with the revolution at Ibrox.
How great was that, Davie? I mean, you win the League Cup and you win the Scottish Cup as a young lad. Your family as well must have been.
Yeah.
I mean, to give your family moments like that so early on must have been such a great. Is it hard to keep your feet on the ground? Or obviously you come from a good background. I suppose that helps, but it must have been an amazing feeling.
No, it was incredible, Lee. But I think throughout my career, I don't think you really realise the occasion. It's great at the time, but you don't realise it until you stop playing. And maybe you watch some videos or you see your medals. But I know my mum and dad were very, very proud. My mum passed away, about 5 months ago. But I know she was obviously proud of what I achieved. And I know for my dad, being an Aberdeen supporter, seeing his son open top bursts and, picking up the Scottish Cup and some medals. And he was a proud father. And the one thing about my dad, it was funny because he was around last night for dinner. I know he's not meant to be around, but he came around for dinner, and he just said how proud he was, and we spoke a lot about being a kid and growing up, and it's probably the first time we've done that, and it was just it was great, and you could actually see how even at he's 79 now, 80 in a couple of months, you can tell how proud he is, and I think he found it difficult when I went to Rangers at the start, but he's proud of his son.
Yeah. You mentioned that you would sign for Rangers. I think the year after. Was there any interest before Rangers came in? Obviously, you played in quite a few cup finals by then, and also excelled at such a young age.
Yeah, there was a few clubs interested. Like Kenny Dalglish was at Liverpool. He called my dad. In those days, he used to call the direct. It was a house phone. There was no mobile phone, so we had this dial-up phone in the middle of the landing. So I remember my dad, he basically turned down Kenny Dalglish. There was Tottenham with David Pleat, John Sillett at Coventry, and later on when I went to Rangers, there was the fee was settled by a tribunal, and each club has to put their case forward as to why Rangers didn't want to pay a lot of money, and he said, well, he's not a Scotland cap, but Aberdeen basically said, well, he had offers from Nantes and Bordeaux and Tottenham, and so all those things came in, which I never knew about at the time. But then when my contract was coming to an end, there was, believe it or not, there was only Sheffield United with Dave Bassett, Ron Atkinson at Aston Villa, and then obviously Rangers. But I think one of the reasons I went to Rangers was the fact that I remember, when I was 18, maybe an opportunity to go to Manchester United, just a huge change. And obviously not being the most confident player, I felt, if I went to Rangers, obviously I'm not saying you're guaranteed to play in Europe every year, but, the way they were going to win a lot of things, and you want to be a part of that. But basically, you're playing against the same teams, going to the same stadiums, only a couple of hours away from my hometown and my family. So I think it was an easy kind of decision in the end.
What was the reaction? Because I think players moving from Aberdeen to back then would have been taken pretty bad. I think now you look at Scott Wright moving, seemed to be as much of a reaction. I mean, how was that, going back to Aberdeen as well and playing?
Well, I didn't realise at the time how big, because like I said, I didn't think I was anything special. I thought I was, I didn't think I was a great player. And I thought, well, okay, I'm going to Rangers, even though I'm an Aberdeen supporter and my dad's an Aberdeen supporter, I'm a local boy made good kind of thing. So I didn't realise what it all entailed, and I soon found out, what happened. But to be honest with you, I got a lot of stick, and a lot of people didn't know the full story, that why I left Aberdeen, because I was quite happy at Aberdeen, to be honest with you, and I'd bought a house in a new development in Aberdeen, a semi-detached house, and come to the end of my contract, and they built new houses. There was detached ones, and I thought I want to go up the property ladder, but I was running a car that I couldn't afford, and I was the only player at Aberdeen that didn't have a club car or a sponsored car. So they gave me an offer, and I was a bit naive. I didn't realise that it wasn't the best offer that they'd given me. But I tried to work out, well, if I got a club car, a sponsored car, I could maybe afford to buy this house that I was looking at. So I went in, I says, okay, the money seems to be okay, but can you get a club car or a sponsored car? And they said, no, you're not a big enough personality. And I went home. I didn't cause any problems. I went home and I thought, but there's reserve team players. I play every game in the first team, and I can't get a car. So I went back in and I says, but Theo Snelders, the club bought Theo Snelders a car when he first come to Pataudry. And then he got a sponsor car. So they still had a car that they owned. And I asked him for the car. I says, look, why don't you give me that car then? And he goes, oh, no, we'll sell you it. So I think they then realised that they were actually wanting the fee for me. And I was a bit naive. So, obviously I went to Rangers. It was probably about 5 days before the league decider game when Aberdeen lost 2-0 to Rangers. I'd already agreed to go to Rangers at that point. But my dad at the time found it difficult. His car got, 10 put on it. My brother was 12 years younger than I am. So he was still at primary school and he got bullied, pushed downstairs and got his hood ripped off and a bit of a hard time. And then when I came back to, Walter Smith was good if we were playing Aberdeen. He would tell me to go up the night before or 2 nights before. And if we won, tell me to stay in Aberdeen, a couple of extra days with the family. I had a young daughter, Chelsea, at the time. And, I maybe got a burger van or something and, somebody would threaten me, driving past. We even went to a restaurant with friends and people would come in and give us abuse. Got death threats through the mail at Ibrox. But again, I was naive and I thought, well, it can't be real. But then I remember, coming to play at Pataudry the first time and it wasn't so much bad. I got a real shock. I don't know why I got a shock. Maybe as I say, I keep saying I was naive, but I would take a throw in and I would get spat on, I'd get punched in the back, and after games you'd be going back onto the bus at Pataudry, and one time it's a midweek game, one of the times I didn't stay up, I was going back on the bus and an Aberdeen supporter come up and told me, oh, you're a great player at Aberdeen and you're doing well at Rangers, give me his, in those days it was autograph books. So he gave me the autograph book and kicked my shins and ran away. It was pretty bad. But I think coming from Aberdeen, I probably should have realised, and I see the frustrations of the Aberdeen supporters. But to be honest, when I played at Pataudry, I ended up enjoying it because they gave me such a hard time that it spurred me on even more. To do well, not against them, but just to show them. And then you think to yourself, well, if I wasn't any good at Aberdeen, they wouldn't have cared that I went to Rangers. Definitely. So obviously, it made me feel good at the same time, gave me a bit more determination.
You mentioned Walter Smith. How much did he impress you as a manager? He seems like a manager that would put a lot of responsibility on you as a player. Yeah. He seemed to have a lot of trust in his players, and especially, at Rangers.
Yeah, I mean, he was. I admire the guy even now. That everybody that played for him has got nothing but good things to say about him. I remember when I first signed, he said to me, "You look after me, and I'll look after you." And he gave me one rollicking. It was against Hibs in the semi-final when we lost. And Keith Wright, he was a guest on your show the other week. I think he scored. That's right. He scored from Mickey Weir's cross. So that was the only game that he had a go at me. And that was for 6 years, and I played every time I was fit. But I think there was a spell where I think his man management was incredible. We lost to, I think, Falkirk, knocked out by Falkirk in the League Cup. We lost to Celtic, and then we got knocked out by AEK Athens, all in the space of about 2 weeks. And I think he was getting a lot of stick, in the media and what have you. But he never ever showed it in the dressing room. And I've been with managers before where you can tell they're under pressure, but it was like business as usual. And when you think, it's his first manager's job and in a massive job at that, he never crumbled. He kept all the pressure away from the players, and he just created an incredible, team spirit. And I know for me, I can speak personally for myself that I would, even now, if I was to play in a bounce game at Ibrox and he was a manager, I'd run through a brick wall for the man.
Yeah. You'd played against Rangers, but who impressed you in that team right away when you were, every day in training and as a professional as well? Who was the ones that?
I think there's a lot of different ones. Like John Brown, for example. He wasn't blessed with skill or pace, but he was such a winner. Stuart McCall, the amount of running he does, and great on the ball. Goffey obviously led by example, and then you've got guys like I was fortunate that Peter Houster played in front of me. At the start, you had Trevor Stephen on the other side, but the one player that I think that never gets the credit that, because obviously he's a big Rangers supporter. It was Ian Ferguson. He lived. I ended up buying a house a few doors down from him, so I'd go in and out to training with him. We'd take car share and stuff like that, but he never got the real credit that he deserved. And he didn't drink. He could be a bit crazy at times, but he'd go on a night out, he wouldn't drink, nothing. But he was just a professional, and he just went unnoticed. No one noticed what he did to the Rangers team. But I know that if there was times he was injured or didn't play, I noticed a huge difference that he wasn't playing. So I think him playing wise, he was a real unsung hero. Richard Gough was somebody that took me under his wing when I first went in, a little bit like Alec McLeish, very encouraging. He played next to me. Well, John Brown was at one side and Goughy was at the other side. And I'm still in regular contact with Goughy today, and good friends. And I just really appreciate what he did for me, because the first day I walked into Ibrox, it's totally different to Pittodrie. You sort of sneak in the back door at Pittodrie. You go into Ibrox. In those days, it wasn't, the training ground wasn't there. I remember you go in with your collar and tie, and Stan, the commissioner, takes you in. You get passed on to Jimmy Bell, and you go down the corridor. And I was absolutely petrified about walking into that dressing room. And if someone had said to me, right, you've got a choice of driving back up the road to Aberdeen, I would have jumped in that car straight away and gone back. Because I walked in, and and there was Mikhailichenko, Kuznetsov, Gough, Haitley, McCoist, Durant. I think even Mark Walters was there at the time. And then I walk in, and there was no squad numbers at that, no kit numbers. It was just like a training number, and I was given number 6 next to, in between Goughy and Ian Ferguson. And I remember Jimmy Bell says to me, he says, you've got big shoes to fill. That's Terry Butcher's old number. And I'm thinking, oh, great. Straight away, you're under pressure. But I was terrified. I was like a mouse for the whole 6 years. I was terrified to speak. But then it was a great experience, and, great. It was a great team spirit there.
You played a lot of games in your first season. You won the league in Cabo. Is that the best way just to settle into a club? And obviously, I think, did you realise at that time that team could go on to have the dominance that they had?
I don't really know what to think. I remember the first game against St Johnstone, and I think Mark Haitley got a penalty kick, and it was never a penalty kick. And I think it was then I realised that you hear this something about you go to Ibrox and you'll never get a penalty kick, or there'll be a penalty kick against you, and that's how it felt. Yeah. It was wondering, how was that a penalty kick? 1-6-0. But we had a tough start because we lost to Hearts, and then we got knocked out the European Cup or Champions League by Sparta. I think it was Sparta Prague we lost. So it was a little bit, and I think we got knocked out. We got knocked out of the cup as well. So it was by Hibs around about that time as well. So it was a difficult start. Andy Gorham, who was obviously probably the best goalkeeper I've certainly played with. He didn't have the greatest start to his career at Rangers, but obviously became a legend there. But I think winning the league was an incredible feeling, because I came close at Aberdeen, and that was probably the best league championship. It was the first one you win. Just it's almost like a relief, because you quickly realise at Rangers that you can't draw a game, you can't lose a game. You've got to win every game. You've got to win every cup. And obviously that first game was great, and then we obviously won the Scottish Cup, and that was a bit of an anticlimax when we beat Airdrie. I remember we won 2-0. We were 2-0 up, and Andy Smith pulled one back. And after the game, everybody was like, it was like a morgue. Everybody was down, and I remember actually saying, "Look, go and enjoy it. You won the cup. In 20 years' time, no one's going to say, oh, Rangers won the cup, but they didn't play well." And that was just the standards that we all set ourselves. And no disrespect to Airdrie, it was almost like, well, we should be better than Airdrie. And it didn't quite work out that way. But when you go to cup finals, teams will always make it difficult. And obviously, Airdrie were no difficult. I think Alec McDonald was the manager at the time, and he'd a great team with a great, team spirit. But it was good to get a cup double at the start. And it was just after that, my dad, he was a little bit, I'm not saying he was disappointed I went to Rangers, I should say. He wasn't exactly annoyed or anything. But it was great because after that cup final, I remember I went back to my house after, I think it was the day after or something, and he said to me, that it's the best move, the best decision you've ever made. So that made the whole thing complete for me.
92, 93, you go on to win the treble. I mean, it just keeps getting better and better. What are memories of that season, Davie?
I think I've been asked a lot of times about that season, and how did you manage to play, or how the team win so many games, or important games? And I think it was just the fact that the games were so quick. There was a period where we played Leeds United on a Wednesday. We played, I think it was Aberdeen in the League Cup final. Then we played Leeds away on the Wednesday. Then we played Celtic again. I think it was at Parkhead. I think we won all the games. But you're talking in the space of 2 weeks, massive games, and you don't get time to think. You don't get nervous because you're recovering. You're obviously desperate to play. And the amount of big games we had that season, it was just enjoyable, and there was so much belief. We'd go to Marseille or Moscow, and play against big teams, Elland Road. Then you come back and maybe play at Brockville or Broomfield, and it would, you laugh at it, but it just showed you the character of everybody. You play against massive games, and you're going back to playing in those places, and we're talking about somebody like Mark Hateley playing that's played at AC Milan and Monaco, and and he was just desperate. And you asked before about the players. There was just so much. I don't think technically we were the greatest team, but we just had so much belief. You look through the whole team, and you've got winners like Andy Gorham, Goffey, Ferguson, John Brown, you'd Gary Stevens, Mark Hateley would run through a brick wall. Just so many guys that had just so much belief in each other, and even when we're a couple of goals down, which happened a lot that season, we'd always come back. And I'm not saying we're invincible then, but we were, very, very difficult to, even if the teams got their noses in front against us and we're tired, we still find a way. I think we went 44 games unbeaten that season. So obviously the Marseille was a bit of a disappointment when we didn't make it all the way to the European Cup final. I think that was obviously a disappointment, but you can't be disappointed with the season that we had.
You mentioned the Leeds games I think they were dubbed the Battle of Britain at the time. I mean, how good were that Leeds team? I mean, they had guys like Gary Speed, Strachan, McAllister was a player that I was getting to an age where he just came to Liverpool. I was just getting into football. Yeah. I could watch him. He was a top player as well. I mean, how great were they games? I think the atmosphere at Leeds must have been incredible as well.
Yeah, I remember the first game where we played Ibrox, and even before we started, we were tipped to get knocked out. But the amazing thing was that Stuttgart played Leeds, and I think Stuttgart beat Leeds, and I don't think we would have beat Stuttgart. But I think Stuttgart maybe played an ineligible player or something. I think there was a replay or something, or maybe they were disqualified, and we ended up playing Leeds United. And I think because it was a British team, it suited us more than anything. Plus, it's England against Scotland. There's a bit more hype. But I remember the game at Ibrox, there was no Leeds United fans there. And again, I don't know why this happened, but I always had to pick the big players up. And I was up against Lee Chapman, who's a giant. And Strachan played a ball, and I had from a corner kick, I had this great clearance out, header, great ball. Great. I mean, I was proud of my clearance. Right to Gary McAllister at the edge of the box, volleyed it in the top corner, and I think, oh my God. And then I think even then, but the players had so much belief. The manager had so much belief that obviously we won the game 2-1. They had the away goal. So everybody was really, thinking, oh, well, the English media, the Rangers are going to get knocked out. And then we did the same again, but it was the opposite. Hateley scored probably one of the best goals I've ever seen. And again, there was no Rangers supporters at Elland Road. And then we scored that goal. But that night, Eric Cantona was playing for them. And, obviously Strachan and Gary Speed, who's no longer with us. They just, I'm not saying they battered us. And I think, Andy Gorham, as like I said earlier, he's incredible. And I think that game, I mean, him alone got us into the group stages of the Champions League. And obviously, it was funny because at the end, we were 2-0 up, and then I think it was Carol Shutt maybe scored to make it 2-1. So we're quite comfortable. And I remember after the game, Leeds United supporters actually, applauding us off the pitch, which was an incredible, incredible experience, I think, more than anything.
Yeah. How did you find the European games and that European level? Did that suit your game, David? Are you comfortable playing? Obviously, you're playing against top teams and players, but that can sometimes bring out the best in you as well,
Yeah, I was quite excited, on those games to play against like Gordon Strachan and what have you. And I remember, we played against Marseille, and you're up against Alan Bokschitz, Rudy Voller, Didier Deschamps, Angloma, Barthez was playing for them, Desailly. I mean, just incredible to go and play. And I always found in Europe, we played Ajax one year, and they had the De Boers and everything, and played against Juventus, Del Piero. And you just look forward to those games because, no disrespect to some of the players you play against, but you play them 4 or 5 times a season, and you sort of know each other. And to go and play against somebody different, really it inspires you. You're going and playing against the best teams in European football. Borussia Dortmund. It was just an incredible experience, and it was always something to look forward to. But there was 2 or 3 seasons where we didn't make it, and we'd get knocked out in the qualifying stages. And I found that it was like the season for a while was flat because you didn't have that excitement of playing against somebody different, a bit top level players.
The next season, you win the league and cup double again, and obviously continuing to dominate and keeping teams like Celtic at bay. How good were the Old Firm around that time? You were, the better team for the years, but there must have been really tough games as well against Celtic.
Yeah, I think from my recollection, I mean, I never lost many Old Firm games, but I think, with Tommy Burns, Celtic were actually the better team. They would actually batter us. I remember one game at Ibrox, and I don't even know what season it was, but they played us off the park, and then Trevor Stevens scored with his knee, and we won 1-0. And you come off the pitch at times thinking, how on earth did you win that? But the most memorable game was the time when Andy Gorham saved a penalty kick from Van Hooijdonk. I think we scored. I think Laudrup scored. Gazza missed a penalty kick. Then Peter Van Vossen had that horrendous open goal miss. And then right at the end, Celtic got a penalty kick and Andy Gorham saves it. And to me, it was so much emotion that night because we could have won about 3 or 4 probably for the first time. And we needed again Andy Gorham to save us. But and I think I felt for Tommy Burns because his team. I think one season they could have won the treble. Or they could have won the league at least because they had enough points. Because I think they lost maybe 1 game or something. And obviously we played the infamous semi-final against Celtic when I got sent off after 6 minutes.
I read about that.
Yeah, which for 84 minutes I was the most nervous person at Hampden because obviously if we'd lost the game it would have all been my fault. So thankfully Ali McCoist, as he always did, would come to the rescue. And but no, the Rangers Celtic games. One thing I'm disappointed that we never actually played a cup final against Celtic in my time. We played semi-finals, but never actually played in an Old Firm Cup final, which would have been nice.
You miss out on the treble, getting, I think, Dundee United won in the Scottish Cup final, and then you mentioned the few years when you struggled in Europe, and then Brian Laudrup comes in. Was that when you kind of thought, if we could keep getting guys like this, we've got a real chance of getting back into Europe?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, I think we weren't the greatest team technically. And I think a lot of teams, I'm not saying they knew how we played, it was getting more and more difficult for us to win, even domestically. But I think when Laudrup came in, you had somebody that can win the game on his own. And then obviously, I think the year later, Gazza comes in. And it just shows you that, there was just that extra little bit that we needed. But again, I think Basil Bowley came in at the same time. He just won the European Cup with Marseille, and we were getting big time players coming in. Obviously Laudrup, Gascoigne, and no one could believe we could get those guys. But they were just this icing on the cake. Those guys that can basically single-handedly win a game on their own. I played against Laudrup in training, and it was one of those players like Davie Cooper. You knew what he was going to do, but somehow you couldn't stop him. So it made it pretty difficult. But no, it was a pleasure playing with them. I know when Laudrup and Basil Bowley first came in, there was a loss to. We knocked out the cup. It might have been AK Athens. It might have been that period where we'd lost a lot of important games early on. But they were just incredible players, and it just showed you that how big a club Rangers were, because those players that come from Marseille, they come from AC Milan. They're not coming from other teams in Scotland. They're coming from massive clubs, and that was the pool that Walter Smith had. He could go in, and everybody knew how good Walter Smith was to play for.
I'm sure you've been asked a lot about Paul Gascoigne, and I think a lot of people say that Rangers got the best of Paul Gascoigne. I mean, what are your memories of playing with Gazza? And obviously there was off the pitch where it must have been a good laugh as well, David.
Gazza was funny. He was. I think I remember when he first came in. I think he was actually quite nervous, a bit like myself. And you wouldn't think somebody like Gazza would be nervous. Played in World Cups and played in Serie A, and probably one of the best players ever to come from England. On the pitch he was fantastic. But there was. When I played with Laudrup would always give me the ball. Not always, but 9 times out of 10 I would get the ball back. But Gazza had this habit of coming towards the left-hand side. I'll make an overlap, and then he'd turn and go out the opposite side. He'd go to the right side all the time. And I think he must have passed to me about twice in 3 years that I played with him. But you just look at the game against Aberdeen when he scored a hat-trick to win the league. I think he felt at home at Rangers. There was no pressure on him, and plus, like I've said, Walter Smith, he'd let Gazza do up to the mischief that he was going to get up to, and but he knew that he had to give him a long enough rope to hang himself, should I say.
Yeah.
And but he always produced on the pitch. There was times in games he'd go into the boardroom and drink sherry or whiskey or whatever because he was that nervous. And then he'd go out and play and be man of the match. There was times. I remember one time I stopped at the petrol station just beside Ibrox and to fill the car up, and somebody says that the guy behind the desk says, "Oh, one of your teammates, Gazza's just been in. He's left a 50 quid behind the counter for some of the kids to get them sweets." Just a real genuine, generous guy. And when we maybe play against Hibs or Hearts or Dundee United, the sort of slightly longer trips back to Glasgow, a lot of the times he would sit next to me and on the way back and have a quiet moment, because I wasn't the most talkative guy, and he'd sort of tell me about his life, and I actually feel for the guy, because he's he's the most genuine and generous guy, and a lot of people took a loan of him, and weren't probably true friends, and I really felt sorry for me. He'd tell me as well that the media followed him everywhere, and he didn't have a minute's peace, and he just wanted to be normal, just have a normal life. And he was free when he was on the pitch. He just totally, he was his own person. He did what he wanted, and I think it was when he was off the pitch that it wasn't great. And then I remember he, obviously he got himself in, a bit of a bad way, and he went to Phoenix. I was living in Phoenix at the time, and he went to some clinic over there, and I tried to go and see him, but I couldn't get to see him, and so I was a bit disappointed, because it would have been, nice to see him, and maybe he'd have liked a friendly face as well, being the other side of the world. But I really feel for him, how he is. But he looks like he's, getting back to where he should be.
Yeah, we mentioned Alex Ferguson, and I think Gazza, I've listened to him tell this story that it was basically between Man U or Spurs, and I think Spurs offered to buy his mum and dad a house, which kind of swung it. Do you think that Alex Ferguson also would have got the best out of Gascoigne?
I think so, yeah. I think, to be honest, I don't think where Gazza went I think Italy was hard for him because it's a bit more disciplined, the language, he's away from his family. I think that was very difficult for him. But I think, Fergie would have got the best out of him. Obviously, I can't remember who the manager was. Was it Terry Venables at Spurs?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's just a genius, and like I say, he always does his talking on the pitch. Even in training, he was incredible. He trained the way he played. But I think maybe he would have gone on to win more things, honours in England, at Manchester United, being a part of a huge a huge organisation. But to be honest with you, if that had happened, we may never have seen Gazza at Ibrox.
Yeah, you clinched the 8th league title in a row at Rangers. How early do people start talking about Nine? Is that something that you pay attention to? It doesn't seem like in the dressing room it would be spoke about as much. It tends to be the media and the fans that kind of carry that.
Yeah, it wasn't. I don't think anybody. It was maybe till about the 8th title that I think that everybody the hype really began to start. But like I said earlier, that my first winning for championship for the first time was great. But after that, every one was a relief. I'm not saying it wasn't enjoyable. It was great when you actually get over the line. But there was no. It was more like a relief as opposed to you win your first trophy at Aberdeen, you win the league at Rangers for the first time, and you win a treble or something. But each winning the league just became. It wasn't a grind. It was just a relief to really, get over the line, because that there's nothing, anything less than winning the league's unacceptable at Rangers. And then obviously with that 8 in a row, we were up against it against Aberdeen. I think Brian Irvine scored early on. It was at the end of the season, we always struggled to, finally win the league, even though we were close, very, very close, and maybe a few games in hand. But obviously Aberdeen, because the rivalry, they made it very, very difficult. And if it wasn't for Gazza, you wouldn't be talking about 9 in a row and what have you. Because that it was 2 goals. He scored a penalty kick, but 2 goals. He basically walked through Aberdeen's midfield and defence and scored 2 great goals. And as I said before, that's the difference that we had with Laudrup and Gascoigne. They could just win the game on their own. And then after that, such a hype, in that summer. But we actually had a number of injuries. I started that following season injured. Alan McLaren was injured, and I think the amount of games that we played previously, it all caught up, and a lot of us. Was a lot of players injured throughout that 9 in a row, the 9th championship season.
And your memories when you finally do clinch 9 in a row, what are your memories of that season? That must have been the biggest relief of all. You mentioned the pressure building up as early as that summer. Yeah,
well, the season, I think everybody was quietly confident that we could do it. And the memory we have is that we played, I think it was Motherwell at Ibrox, when we needed to win the league. And, it was the weirdest experience, because we all thought that we'd already won the league. We just show up, and not so much, it's a bit disrespectful, you show up when you win the league, but there is a little bit. You're playing at Ibrox, you're playing against Motherwell, you think, like, okay, this is it. Like I said, the parties were organised and everything, and Owen Coyle scored a couple of goals. We didn't do it. It was a huge disappointment. And then we got in the dressing room, and I remember thinking, right, the next game's at Tannadice and then at Tynecastle, and we need to win one of them. And to be honest with you, they're the 2 worst places. I hated going to play there. They were difficult to get results. And you think, Motherwell at Ibrox, you're going to win that game. It didn't happen. And then obviously you have to go to Tannadice, and it was a real grind. It was never ever easy at Tannadice. And but I think, when you think back now, but all the opponents didn't want to be the team that gave us 9 in a row or lost that day. So there's obviously an extra motivation for those teams, even though in the league there's not a lot to play for. But clinching the 9 in a row was fantastic. My regret was that it actually turned out to be my last game for Rangers, and I found it. If I could go back again, I would have. I didn't go back on the bus that night. I just went back to Glasgow and with my wife and family back. And I don't know why I did it. Maybe I didn't realise how big 9 in a row was. I don't know. and that was the last time that I played for Rangers, and that's probably the only regret I've got in my career, that I didn't go back on the bus and enjoy again, I don't think I realised how big 9 in a row was. Even though it was all over the newspapers, and it was a strange feeling.
What were the other reasons for going to Leeds? Obviously, it's a chance to play in the Premier League, and you mentioned that you didn't realise how big 9 was, and obviously the club was going for 10. Is that the reason why you left? If you realised at the time, well, 10's massive, you probably would have stayed.
Well, no, I think I was 28 at the time. I had a feeling that Walter Smith would maybe move on at some point, because if I'd stayed, I'd signed a longer contract, and I knew that Walter wouldn't be there forever, and I didn't want to have my career end playing in the reserves and moving downwards. Plus, I was 28. It was an opportunity maybe to go to the Premiership or go somewhere else. And then, when you think about it, I think it was 11 years or 12 years playing against the same teams 4 times a season, same players. There's only so many times you can play against Maurice Malpass and Jim McInally and those guys, because they're sick of the sight of each other. But at that point, it was probably the January time. I almost went to Inter Milan. Things were agreed between the two clubs. Roy Hodgson was the manager, so that was probably the inkling that I was going to move on. And it fell through at the last minute because they lost a game, and all transfers were on hold. And then they lost the next game or drew the next game. He got sacked, so that was the end of it. And then there was clubs, in other clubs, Atletico Madrid, Valencia, and Napoli, and there was a lot of interest there. And then George Graham was so persuasive, between then and the end of the season, that he convinced me to go to Leeds United. But quickly you go to Leeds United, and I realised quickly that it's a big mistake leaving Rangers.
Yeah. How early on did you realise that? With George Graham, he was kind of renowned for being a defensive-minded manager. Did he try and change your game straight away, or did he just want you to be the David Robertson that was at Rangers?
No, well, when I went there, I actually, in theory, failed a medical because I had no cruciate ligament. I didn't realise I'd been playing for 5 years with no cruciate ligament, and suddenly I got a medical, and I developed a limp straight away when I knew, even though I'd played 5 years with no issues. And the deal only went through because George Graham was going away on holiday, so he wanted it all tied up. So I signed, and I was probably only, I think when I played for Leeds United, 70% fit, because I knew about the injury I had. Even though obviously it's probably a mental thing, I'm not sure. And then I went to play pre-season. I did really well, and we played Arsenal the first game, and at Elland Road, and then we beat Manchester United, and the first few games were good, and then suddenly George developed this thing where I wasn't really allowed to attack. He wanted me to defend a different way, and I think the Leeds United supporters turned on me a bit, and it wasn't because of that really that I knew I'd made a mistake, but it was quite early on when it was around about the time Marco Negri had just signed for Rangers, and he was banging in all these goals. And quickly you think to yourself, Leeds are a massive club, and they are a big club, but Rangers are, in my opinion, up there with the biggest clubs in the world. And I think when you leave, you think that the grass is green on the other side, and you find out pretty quickly it's not.
I just wanted to find out a bit more. I read some of the memorable games that you had, some low points at Leeds, but you definitely had some highs. You mentioned the 1-0 win against Man U. I think it was a header from David, and I think it was at Elland Road. That must have been a great experience. Obviously, that rivalry back then was just as big as Man U Liverpool and Man U Man City.
Yeah, I remember coming into for that game. Parking my car at the car park and walking Elland Road, and I remember Leeds United supporters, loads of them there, and saying, we don't care if we don't win another game this season, we'll have to win this game. That's how much it meant to them. And I remember, it was a great feeling because I was directly up against David Beckham, and I think that with Cantona was playing for him, and Roy Keane. It was actually the day that Roy Keane injured himself with Alfie Haaland. when all that sort of things kicked off. But it was a great atmosphere. But it's still nothing like playing in an Old Firm game or playing in front of a full house at Ibrox. It was a great experience, and we beat Newcastle 4-1. I remember one game I was having such a torrid time, and this was George Graham at his best ever motivational speech with me. He says to me, we're playing West Ham on a Monday night, so we're in the morning to do a little loosener, and after it, he took me in his office and he says, Davie, he says, you're having a bit of a tough time. I was going to drop you, but I'm going to have to play you because Gunnar Haller's injured. And,
brilliant.
And I thought to myself, oh, great. So I went home that afternoon. I remember just looking at the ceiling thinking, oh my God, I've got this big game on TV, Sky Monday night, and I've got a manager that doesn't want to play me, but he's having to play me because somebody's injured. And it was weird because at that point I was hanging on to, I was reading newspapers because obviously there was no internet and anything then. I was reading newspapers and club calls to try and get something positive, because in those days managers never said to you, well done, or that you had a good game there, or a good pass or something. It was all negative. And I remember they had the Yorkshire Evening Post, and they used to have the marks out of 10 on a Monday. And I remember the guy Don Waters used to do it, and no matter, it used to read Nigel Martin 8, Gary Kelly 9, David Robertson 5, Lucas Radeby 9. And if I had a good game, I might sneak and get a 5 or a 6. So we played against West Ham, and Harry Redknapp was the manager, and I actually played really well that night, and I whipped in a great ball to Hasselbank. He scores by header, and so I decided I might get a bit of praise here on the club call. It was one of that 0800 numbers, so I dial up, and the guy, he comes in, he says, oh, and Leeds United scored. David Robertson, who was booed throughout the game, put in a cross for Hasselbank, and I couldn't get anything. And actually, the harder I tried, because the supporters, I'm not saying they turned on me, it was like every time the ball come close to me, there was a groan. It was like, oh no, what's going on? Oh, and it, obviously you could hear it, and I just got worse and worse, and ended up. Played Filbert we played Leicester at Filbert Street and went for a header. My knee gave way, and basically that was the beginning of the end of my career. And it was hard because I think I was only ever 7. I actually did okay at Leeds United for the one season, but I probably played. I was only 70% fit for all the games.
How do you look back on your playing career, David? It must be great to look back and think of where you came from, and you said that you got into football late, and then you go on to have the experience you had and played at such a high level as well.
Yeah, well, I think I remember when we were moving to America, and when I used to win medals, I used to give them to my wife, and she'd put in a handbag, and I didn't even know where they went. And it wasn't until we were moving house, moving to America, and there was this box, and I opened it up, and I didn't realise that, I had 14 winners' medals in Scotland, and I think it was 3 or 4 runners-up medals. And I looked at it, and I couldn't believe, when you see them all together, how fortunate I was. And and when my career first started, and I wasn't even good at football, didn't like football, until you play in the Champions League. Even though I didn't play many times for Scotland, played at every level for Scotland. And I just, there's maybe 1 or 2 things that I regret. Obviously, maybe moving to Leeds, even though we loved living in Leeds, it was fantastic. Obviously, Rangers, you can't take away the success that we had there. And but the one thing I think that I'm really proud of is that when I was fit, I always played. I think I was only ever left out of a team once, and that was at Aberdeen. That was my own fault when I put a stupid article in a newspaper criticising the club, and I got Portfield left me out for a couple of games, and I was back in. But apart from that, I do think because of the lack of confidence I had in my own ability, if I was dropped or stuck in the reserves, I think I would have just sort of basically just withered out of the game.
Yeah, and you go on to into management. How early on did you realise, were you one of the players that people would look at and think he could go on to be a coach?
No. I mean, everybody knows I'm so quiet, and I didn't even fancy myself as a coach. As I said, I was fortunate enough to, do well out of the game, that, I could have just sat back and, retired or had a comfortable life. But I think the weirdest thing how I got involved in coaching was that I finished at Leeds, and basically I still had a bit of my contract to go. I did a lot about community coaching and not a lot. Then I got put to Vietnam and Thailand with 4 coaches, some project over there. I think it was about 4 or 5 weeks, and I played a couple of games with other coaches and like exhibition games. And even though my fitness was bad and my knee wasn't great, I came back and I did some more charity games like Peter Lorimer and Alan Clark and some of those players. And keep in mind, they were 20 years older than me, and I thought, God, I'm looking pretty good here. And John Sherrin at Montrose, through a mutual friend, realised I was playing again, and he took me back basically to play at Montrose, and obviously did a little bit of coaching. Not that I did a lot of it. And then I sort of got hooked on it. I only lasted 9 games at Montrose. Achilles tendon snapped. And then I eventually went to Elgin for, I think it was close on 3 years. And as much as people think, it was a bit of a failure time, I actually, the team had always been bottom or second bottom in the league. But that was a real eye-opener as well, because, you're used to being in the Premiership, the Scottish Premier League, and then suddenly you show up to training at Elgin on a Tuesday night, and there's only 7 players, because some of them are in Glasgow, some of them in islands off the west coast of Scotland. They don't come to training. Some are in Dundee, and a real eye opener. And it helped me in my coaching career. But it was really relatively successful, because when I left Elgin, I resigned due to a failed takeover bid, and I think we're in the playoff positions when I left. And then went back to Montrose for a very, very short spell. And by then I had a B licence, and decided to move to America, coaching there. Was there for 10 years at a youth organisation. I went there to coach 3 teams, ended up running the whole club and growing the club. And then I coached in the USL for Phoenix FC. I was a part owner there, and that sort of ended a disaster with lawsuits and takeovers, and it was just players not getting paid. So that was a very, very difficult time. And then I obviously moved on to making the craziest decision that I've ever made, by going to a war zone in India without doing any homework. But I just, it wasn't something that I planned on going into. It's just the one thing I'm still involved in it really is because the winning and losing when you play, you've got that, the determination. I was fortunate that I won a lot of things, so it made it difficult. It made it different, because I was always been a winner, because I've been in winning teams, and that was the part that was a void in my life. And I had an opportunity to go to China just before India, and also Uganda. And obviously decided to, for some strange reason, go to Kashmir.
Yeah, I watched the brilliant documentary, and what really struck me about it, even though you say that it is quite a crazy idea going, but even watching it, you kind of want to go and play there as well. You kind of think that would be amazing to try and have that effect. Is that why you keep going back? Because I really look at that and think that you've got the chance every day, just not to inspire the group of boys, but inspire a town that's went through continues to go through some really tough times. Is that why you keep going back? Yeah,
it is. It's a bit of an emotional attachment, because I think it's close on 5 years that I've been there, and I remember when I first went there. I mean, it took me forever to get there. I left on a Friday from Phoenix. I went to Phoenix, to Detroit, to, I think it was Doha, to Delhi, to Srinagar, which is the capital of Kashmir. I left on a Friday, arrived on a Monday, and I couldn't. When I got there, obviously you're used to, being at clubs where there's at least training kit, there's balls, there's cones, there's whatever. There was virtually nothing. Players had no training kit. They wore leather jackets to train, something like bikers' jackets. They took their own ball. And I thought in India everywhere was, summer, sunshine all the time, but they've got seasons there. And I arrived in January and it was like snow, and I ended up, with nowhere to train. We ended up training in meant to be this indoor facility. It turns out it was somebody's lounge in their house. They'd taken the furniture out. And just so many things but to be honest with you, they're great people. And, I think in this, not long after I was there, we actually won the second division, which, believe it or not, the owners actually applied to get in. It's meant to be the state league, ended up in one of the national leagues. By accident. So they got in there and with no idea what was going on, and we would have to go like train journeys for 30 hours, bus journeys for 24 hours, and with the lowest budget by a long way, we managed to win the I-League 2 we didn't lose a game. A lot of the players were from trialists and in Calcutta, and taking a chance from agents and what have you. So then eventually we got in the I-League, which is obviously one of the big leagues there, and suddenly we're sponsored by Adidas. We didn't have dressing rooms before. We've now got dressing rooms. We've got floodlights. And when I first started there, because the club was brand new, there was probably about 100 people, 200 people went to the games, and it's because there was nothing to do. In Kashmir, there's no movie theatre, there's no fast food places. There's no bars. There's just nothing to do for kids, and there's a lot of curfews where you've got to stay indoors a lot. And some people would go to the games, 200 people, just for something to do. And then suddenly we get in the big league, and we play Churchill Brothers, who are a big club there, and we end up getting 20,000 people in a 15,000 seat stadium, and they're just so passionate. Probably it's very much like when you go and play there, so it's almost like being in a European game. The atmosphere is so good there, and the club's just got stronger and stronger. Obviously, with the 2 documentaries, there's supposed to be an English drama series about the me and the team. There's a Bollywood / Hollywood group that are doing I think it's a series over there, or a movie. So there's a lot of spin-offs with the whole thing, just based on the club's come from nothing, and more so where the club's based. Because, as I say, there's a lot of hard times, and they've got the ability to switch the internet off with a flick of a switch, so you can't even communicate home. It's a bizarre place, but it's something that would be very, very difficult to leave.
Brilliant. I've taken up a lot of your time, Davie, but I ask all my guests to pick the best 11 of teammates that they've played with. So if you want to try and do, I know it's difficult. You can have a subs bench if you don't want to leave any guys out.
You gave me a warning, so I did a little bit of homework on it. So I've actually gone for a 3-4-3 just to get certain players in. So
very attacking.
It's the first time I've done this, and obviously I've been fortunate, the goalkeeper part of it. I've played with Jim Leighton, Theo Snelders, Nigel Martin, fantastic goalkeepers. But Andy Gorham, by a miles, definitely the best goalkeeper I've ever played with. Although he played for me at Elgin, and he wasn't very good at that point. But
a bit heavier.
But no, he's fantastic, and I think he's a major part of our success in the big games. The Rangers, Celtic games, and the Champions League games, and then 3 at the back, and just to get these guys in, just because they were so influential in my career, and obviously they're legends. Alec McLeish, Richard Gough, and Willie Miller.
Not bad.
The back 3, not much. You don't need fullbacks for those guys. Although there's 2 of them have got a lack of pace. And 4 across the middle, Peter Weir on the left, Laudrup on the right, even though he's meant to be on the left. Just 2 guys that basically made me a player. Peter Weir was, he's coming to the end of his career, but the ability he had was just incredible. I remember as a kid watching him destroy Ipswich and Mick Mills. And I was fortunate enough to play with him. He encouraged me a lot. And then obviously Laudrup's, obviously I think he's the best player that I've ever played with. The two in midfield, obviously Gazza, even though he didn't pass the ball much to me, but he's one of the reasons that I've got as many medals as I've got. And like I mentioned earlier, Ian Ferguson, just because he's just all round player, he's just a winner. And then you've got, I could name, what's his name? I could name Stuart McCall, Ian Durrant, all those guys, but I just think Ian Ferguson for me is just certainly one of the first players I would have in a team sheet. I'd love to have him in my team now. And then three forwards, obviously there's no surprise, McCoist and Haitley. And it's not until recently that, when I've been, bored in India and stuff, you look at old videos on YouTube, and I never realised how good. I knew Mark Haitley was good, but I never realised how good he was. That he's a big, tall lad, great in the air, so much pace, great left foot, just incredible. And some of the goals he scored for being a big guy is just incredible. Obviously, Ali for the amount of goals he scored, even though a lot of them came off his backside or his knee or his thigh or back of his head, whatever, but just in the right place at the right time. And then one of the best strikers I've ever played with is Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank.
I loved him as a player.
Just his finishing, the power he created with his side foot. And I remember a spell at Leeds. He went a few games without scoring a goal, and normally strikers, can't cope with that. But he's so single-minded, never lost confidence. And I think it just shows when he left Leeds. I do feel that if Leeds pushed the boat out to keep him, they wouldn't have been the mess they were. I think they would have went on and won the Champions League that year. But then he left and went to Atletico Madrid, who got relegated, and he was the top goal scorer in Spain. So it just shows you how good he was. But just he was a fantastic striker. Just so much, even training, the strength was just incredible.
Who would you pick to manage that team, David? Who's the best manager that you've played with? Under?
Without a doubt, Walter Smith, without a doubt. Just like I said before, he's man management. He was brilliant for me, got the best out of me. He knew how to handle everyone. We had a lot of big names, and some guys weren't playing, but they were all happy. And that's something you don't get. And obviously it was complemented well by Archie Knox. Archie was at Aberdeen with me, and then obviously 6 years at Rangers. So I spent a lot of time with Archie Knox, and the two of them were just an incredible partnership. And as I say, that the 6 years at Rangers were just totally incredible.
Brilliant. Just before I let you go, you've got a book coming out soon.
Yeah.
David, when is that book coming out?
It actually it got launched, or it's been available on Amazon since the 29th of March. It's called The Quiet Man Roars.
Okay.
So it basically goes through my childhood all the way through to COVID and the crazy days in India, which I think it's probably the highlight of the book. Just some of the stories, and I've actually read that part of the book. I've read the whole book, obviously, but that part I've read it, and I've just thought to myself, I can't even believe I lasted 4.5, 5 years going to India. When you see it all together. But no, it's available now. And Alistair Aird's the author. He contacted me during the first lockdown, and obviously with a bit of time. And there was meant to be a book 2-3 years, a couple of times before, and it never really got off the ground. But fortunately, he approached me, and we did it. And he was excellent. His attention to detail is fantastic, and it was actually really enjoyable. And I actually found out he knew more about me than I knew about myself. So.
Yeah. I always end with a question from myself, David. How would you like to be remembered as a footballer?
I think at the moment I'm remembered as being the guy that scored the goal that was offside. It wasn't offside. I was the guy that got sent off after 6 minutes, and the guy that swears on TV. But I just like to be remembered as a good teammate. In the book, I was very critical of myself as a player, and never, like I said, not much confidence in myself. But a lot of teammates at Aberdeen and Rangers did comments about me, and I was actually quite surprised that they actually thought I was, a good player. But I think I was a good teammate more than anything. I'm certainly a player that you would want to have in the trenches with you.
Yeah, I think you've proved that. Even when I was looking back on, obviously I was a bit too young for your career, David. But even looking back, I think that you don't do yourself justice how a top player you must have been. And I just wanted to say before I let you go that I really want to thank you for coming on my podcast. I mean, you got back to me, straight away, and you've been really generous with your time tonight. So I just want to end by saying thanks, Davie.
No, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it, and maybe do it again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. I'll let you go, Davie. Thanks again, mate.
Okay.
Top man.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, cheers.
Cheers. Take care.